Everybody, this is the first lesson for Adobe Photoshop for CAD 302. For this lesson, you're going to need several files. So first one is the Photoshop exercises. Here, it'll give you the due date and the listing of each project or each demo that we're going to be doing each week. So we're going to start with the Lady Gaga demo. Then you're going to be working on independent zombie and punk Photoshop exercise. And then after that, in week 9, we're going to work on a mood board demo called Rococo Romance. Vanner's Croquis, which is an illustration demo. And then in week 11, we're going to do a demo where you will learn how to create a textile print in Photoshop. So again, this is called Photoshop Exercises. The other file you're going to need is the Gaga intro. So this is the demo, which I'm actually going to do right now with you step by step. And I'm going to be actually following all of the points that you can see arranged in order. So you can watch the video and then also you can refer to this handout as well. So this is called Gaga Intro Demo. So that's the Photoshop intro. For this, you're going to need the week 8 demo files. So again, this is on the assignments tool folder, the Photoshop exercise assignments tool folder, so you can download it from there. You're going to have to double click on the zip folder to expand it, and then you're going to see all of the JPEGs, including the Lady Gaga face here. So you can use these JPEGs for the zombie and punk exercise, and also you're going to use the Lady Gaga face for the main demo, the intro to Photoshop. So you can also see the Photoshop intro slides. So I'm going to go over that first, and then we're going to start looking at the basic tools, and we're going to practice using them with the Lady Gaga's face. So I'm just going to go over the main uses of Adobe Photoshop in fashion. So you're going to be using it a lot for mood boards. So inspiration boards, mood boards, and putting together images in a collage-like format and being able to add text and color. We're going to be using a lot for retouching as well. So here's an example of retouching. We're going to be using Photoshop to render fabrics, prints, illustrations. So one of the exercises that you're going to be doing is creating an illustration from a scanned outline, which we will fill with color and print in Photoshop. Here's another example where we have scanned actual fabrics and then we added the fabrics to the illustration. Here's an example from Picleris Paris where they have used the Photoshop for coloring the fabric and prints in Photoshop, as well as adding backgrounds. Photoshop is also very often used for textile prints. So here's an example from Atlantis collection by McQueen that uses textile prints created in Photoshop. And in my own work, I use Photoshop a lot for textile prints. So you can visit my Instagram at Zoran Dobrik to have a look at my prints created in Photoshop. So now I will just quickly go over some student work examples that are really great. So here's an example by Marisol Kim. This is her graduating collection mood board. So you're going to be using Photoshop a lot in your graduating collection. She also put together her design board in Photoshop, so you can see the fabric scans, the illustration, and the technicals. Students will also use Photoshop for their customer profile board. So here's one example. So it's a collage type format. And another example of a mood board as well. And another example of illustration boards that are done in Photoshop. So you can see the illustrations were colored in Photoshop in this case. There's 2 examples by Prada. They're really very creative when it comes to using Photoshop and creating interesting collages. And now we're going to just start looking at some of the basic information that you need to keep in mind when working in Photoshop. So Adobe Photoshop is a raster-based program. So the artwork consists of pixels. It's also referred to as image editing or paint program. So when you zoom into a Photoshop artwork, you're going to see the individual pixels that make up your artwork. On the other hand, as you have already noticed, Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based program, so it's object-oriented and it's made of vector shapes and anchor points and lines. So this is a vector-based program. So that is the main difference between them. So as we mentioned, Photoshop is raster-based. It consists of pixels and it's called image editing or paint program. You can actually edit and change each pixel and it gives you very realistic images. It does lose quality when you're resizing images. So if you have a small resolution image and you try to make it very large, then it's going to become very blurry and very pixely. Whereas in Illustrator, you were able to change the size of the vector object without losing the quality of the image. But it doesn't work that way with the raster-based or pixel-based Photoshop artworks. The other thing is also Photoshop uses much more memory compared to Illustrator, especially if you have high resolution and multiple layers. And in terms of resolution, you have to remember that that is the number of pixels per inch. So PPI, or pixels per inch, is your resolution. So when you're printing an artwork, then usually you have to have at least 300 and higher pixels per inch, but I would say minimum 300 pixels per inch for printing. And if you're using a file for just on-screen viewing, then 72 pixels per inch will be enough for on-screen viewing. If you're printing fabric, for example, you can use 150 pixels per inch or 200. And if you are doing a business card, for example, with very tiny font, then I would say you would need to use 500 or 600 pixels per inch. But as a general rule, usually 300 pixels per inch is good for printing for your portfolio, for example. So if you go to image size, you're going to see the resolution in pixels per inch. And again, that would have to be at least 300 for good printouts. So bear that in mind. If you're scanning or using photographs, then of course you're going to use at least 300 pixels per inch. But if you're looking for images on the internet, then you can type in the name of the subject you're looking for, let's say cats or Picasso or whatever. Then you have to click on Tools, and then in the drop-down menu you have to select Large. So that way Google is going to give you only large images for that particular subject. So again, click on Tools, and then in the Size drop-down menu you click on Large, and then the computer will only give you large images for that particular subject. If you took photos with your camera, it's going to be a little bit weird when you open it in Photoshop because it'll give you like a crazy large size. Here you can see 42 inches by 56 inches and my resolution is 72. So in that case, what I recommend is just start a new file, let's say 11 by 14 for my mood board, and then preset it as 300 pixels per inch. And then I would just go select all and then edit copy and select your photograph, and then go back and then just paste it to your new file that has 300 pixels per inch. And then you will be able to paste this picture from your phone or from your digital camera onto your mood board. So that would be the simplest approach because it'll always appear like it's got 72 resolution, but really large width and height if you're downloading it from your phone. So again, what I recommend is just start a new file in whatever paper size you need using 300 pixels per inch resolution, and then you'll be able to just copy and paste this onto your new artboard for your mood board, for example. So most common file formats are AI, Adobe Illustrator, so we already know that from before. When you save a Photoshop file, it's going to be saved as a PSD. So the extension will be PSD, meaning it's a Photoshop file. You can also export it as a JPEG. If you're going to use it on the internet, you should export it as a JPEG, or if you're going to use it on Instagram. You're also going to use JPEG for emailing and for websites, etc. Another format is TIFF. So TIFF is sometimes used for very large, huge files, such as textile prints, and then that is sort of like a compressed pixel-based format that you can use. And the last format we're going to look at is a PDF. So PDFs are great because any computer can open PDFs, even if they don't have Photoshop or Illustrator. So I recommend even saving your resume or your PDF in, your resume or your portfolio in PDF format. So then anybody can open it, even if they don't have Photoshop or Illustrator. So PDF format is very versatile and it can be emailed to anybody. So it's really great. In terms of image modes, you should go to image mode and check what format you currently have. So in the menu, you just have to go to image on top and then mode. And this is where you can check what you currently have, and this is where you can change it. So RGB mode is for on-screen viewing. And in order to make your filters work, you should use this mode. CMYK refers to cyan, magenta, yellow, black, is for printing, color separation, and the reason why it's called CMYK is because your printer is using cyan, magenta, yellow, and black when you're printing, so it's using those ink colors. I would say it's safe to just always keep your artwork in RGB. Even if you're sending it to a textile mill, they will request RGB format, so you can just always keep it in RGB. And then also that way your filters will work. You can use grayscale format when you don't want to have any color as well. And finally, again, you can go to image mode menu and then you can change it to RGB, CMYK, or grayscale, or whatever you may need. So this slide just shows you different tools. If you put your mouse over a tool, if you just hover it, it'll give you the tool's name. So if you can't remember any of the tool's names, that's fine. You can just put your mouse over it and then it'll give you the name. Also, the same as in Illustrator, if you click in the tiny little corner at the bottom right, you will be able to see the other tools that are available under each tool. So for example, the top one you'll see here is the spot healing brush, but also underneath you can find the patch tool, the red eye tool, and the healing brush. So you should have a look at this and familiarize yourself with some of the main tools that you're going to be learning. The other thing is also, in terms of the workspace, the thing on top is the menu. Then you have tool options bar. So the tool options bar will be different depending on what tool you're using. Here you can see close, minimize, zoom, toolbox, document window, status bar. And then the other thing, most importantly, you can see the current document and view size and color mode. So that will be visible here. So the current document's name is here, and you can have multiple documents open the same as in Illustrator. And then of course the toolbox. So you can have a look at this handout and get yourself familiar with this. And again, as I mentioned, for the exercises we're doing right now, you're going to need the Photoshop exercises brief rubrics, which just lists all of the different demos we're going to be doing each week. Then Photoshop intro slides, which is this slide I'm currently showing you right now. Then there's going to be the Gaga intro demo, which is the step-by-step instruction on how to use the basic tools. And then you're going to find week 8 demo JPEGs, which is a zip folder inside of which you're going to find Lady Gaga's face, as well as some of the JPEGs that you can use for your zombie punk self-portrait, which will be an exercise we're going to be doing after the Lady Gaga demo. And then please make sure that you save and download all of these files because you're going to use them in the future, and it's not covered in the textbook by Robin Schneider. So I strongly recommend that you keep everything that I give you so that you can use it in the future. So right now we're going to start working on the basic Photoshop tools using the Lady Gaga image, and that's going to be next. Thanks. So in this video, we're going to learn some of the basic Photoshop tools, and I'm going to use the Lady Gaga image to practice using them. So the first thing is in Photoshop, you can go to File, Open, and then Browse to your folder or wherever you have saved it, and select the Gaga image and then click on Open, and then it'll open on your screen. The other way to do this would be to select a particular image that you want to open. In this case, I've got this piercing JPEG, and then you go to right click, open with, and then select Photoshop from the menu. So that's another way to open a file. I'm going to close this one, and then we're going to start working on the Lady Gaga image. So you would have to go to Window, Layers, to make sure your layers are displayed. And then to navigate, you're going to go to Control minus to zoom out. You're going to do Control or Command plus to zoom in. You're going to go to Command 0 to see the full artwork on your screen, so fit to screen. And then you can also use the zoom tool, which is here, to zoom in, or you can click here and zoom out. The other thing you can do with the zoom tool is you can just click and drag, and then also it'll zoom in. So that's how to navigate. If you are really zoomed in a lot, you can just go to Command 0 and it'll go back to display the full picture for you. The other thing to navigate is the hand tool. So I can click and drag with the hand tool, and then I'll be able to move my artboard around. Next, we're going to look at image size. So if I go to image size, I can see what resolution I have. So I've got 72 pixels per inch, and I've got about 9 inches by 7 inches here, so that's the size of the image. So if you have a resolution that's 300 pixels per inch and you wanted to change it to 72 so you can use it on Instagram, then you could do it from here. You could just put the resolution you wish to have. So it's okay to go from bigger resolution and make it smaller. However, if I go from a small resolution, such as 72, and if I try to make it bigger, such as 100, I could do it, but the image does become a little bit blurry. So you have to be mindful of that. So you can always use high resolution and make it lower, which is fine. But if you have very small resolution and you try to make it bigger, it'll work, but it'll make your image a little bit blurry. So in such cases, I would just try to rescan or rephotograph or search the internet for a higher resolution image in that case. But again, you can go to image mode, check what you have. So at the moment I've got RGB, but if I want to change it to grayscale or CMYK, I could do it from there. And again, image size, you can change the resolution, and also you can change the size as well. So if I wanted to have it 4 inches, it'll automatically adjust the height, and then it'll change the size of my image. So I'm going to go to Edit, Undo, or Command Z. Next, we're going to have a look at the canvas size. So if you go to Image Canvas Size, you're going to be able to change the area, the size of the blank canvas area, which will be around your image. So this is not changing the size of Lady Gaga's head, but it's just adding extra canvas around her. So right now I've got 8.89 inches. So if I wanted to do, let's say 15, I could do that, and then I could do 15 inches here as well. And then you can see here that the dot refers to the center of the image, and the arrows indicate where this blank canvas space will be added. So in this case, it'll be added evenly all around, but in this case, it would just be added towards left and right and towards the bottom of her head. But I want it to be evenly distributed all around her. So if that's what I want, then I will click here, and then the extra canvas space will go all around her. So just practice this and notice that it'll give you the extension differently depending on where you click. So I'll click on the center, and then the canvas will be added evenly all around. You can also determine what canvas size you want. So from the drop-down menu, you can see I've got black, white, gray. I'm going to keep it as white. Once I click on OK, you will see that I've added extra canvas all around, but I have not changed the size of her face. Okay, so that's image canvas size. Next, I'm going to go to Window, Workspace Essentials. So you can double check, but usually if you are in the Essentials mode, then you will see the basic tools that you will require to use. Next, we're going to image rotation. So if I go to image rotation, you can see I can go 180, I can go 90 degrees clockwise. I can also flip canvas horizontal or vertical. So let's just go 90 degrees clockwise, and then it'll rotate your canvas. I'm going to go to undo this. So you can experiment with this a little bit more, but we're going to go look at some crop techniques. So there's different ways to crop. So one way to crop would be to use the crop tool. So here's the crop tool, and then you can see that you can click and drag in order to crop, and then you can also move it around. So you can determine what you want to keep. Let's say I want to keep this much. And then when I'm finished, I can just click enter, and then it's going to crop it. I'm going to undo this and show you another way. Personally, I like using the rectangular marquee tool to crop. So in that case, I would just click and drag to select what I would like to keep, and then I will go to image crop, and then it'll crop it for me. So those are different ways to crop your image. You can use whichever one you want. So next, we're going to go and have a look at the View menu. Okay, next, we're going to look at the View menu. So if you go to View, Actual Size, so View, Actual Size, the computer is going to display your image as if it was printed on a piece of paper or on a piece of fabric. If you go to View and you turn on your rulers, you can actually use your physical ruler and compare it to your ruler on your screen, and you will see they will match. So I do this very often when I print fabric because I really want to see what size or what scale of the print I'm going to have on the piece of fabric. So if you turn on your rulers and if you go to View Actual Size, then you can see what it's actually going to look like in the real life when it's printed out. If you have an image that you're going to be putting on your website, then you can just go to View 100%, and then it'll show you what it would look like on your website or on a digital screen. So those are two different things you can use. You can also go to View Screen Mode Standard or Full Screen Mode. So if I want to go to View Screen Mode, Full Screen Mode, then I can see my textile print or whatever I have without any menus. To get out of this view, you're going to hit Escape, and it's going to go back to normal. So I use that a lot when I'm working on large mood boards or textile prints. The other thing you can do is bring down the guides. So if you click and drag on the ruler, you're going to be able to bring down the guides. So that's the same as in Illustrator. Next, we're going to have a look at some of the selection tools that are available to you. And there are many different selection tools in Photoshop. So here you can see on top, there's the rectangular tool, elliptical marquee, single row, and single column. So if I click on the rectangular, I can then click and drag to select a portion of an image. If I press Shift, it's going to constrain it into a rectangle, and if into a perfect square. And if I don't press Shift, then I can just click and drag and make a rectangular selection. The marching ants indicate the selection. On top, you can see different modes. So this is the regular mode, and then this one here is addition, add to selection mode. So if I click on that, then I can actually keep adding to my selection like so. And if I click on this one, then this is subtract from selection mode. So if I click on that, then it's going to subtract a particular area from my selection. So I can use these different modes, and then this is the normal mode. So now if I go to edit copy, I could go to edit paste, and then a computer will paste this selection into a new layer, and the new layer is automatically selected. So if I click on the move tool here, then I can just move this copy, and then I can just see what I have in the new layer. So the same as in Illustrator, you can double click and rename your layer. But when you're making more copies, you have to go back to the original. So if I want to copy her lips, I have to go back to the original. So let's select the elliptical selection. Again, I can use it in a normal mode, in which case every time I click and drag, I'm going to lose my selection. So if I say select her lips, I can do the addition mode, and then I can add to it like so. And then I can go to edit copy, edit paste, and then that's going to create a new layer, and then I can move it with my move tool. So you can practice using the rectangular and elliptical marquee tool with or without Shift pressed, and then you can also try using the normal mode, add to selection, or subtract from selection mode. The other selection tool you have available is the lasso and the polygonal lasso and the magnetic lasso. So the lasso on top is just a plain one. So here again, I'm going to go back to the main layer. I can simply just click and drag and make a selection. I can feather or not feather the selection, but right now I'm going to put 0 for the feathered selection so I can get really sharp outline of when I'm selecting with the lasso. So I'll just go click and drag here, 0 feather, so that means it's going to give me a sharp edge, and then this is my selection. And you have noticed that even with this tool I can do add to selection or subtract from selection mode as well, so they all have this option. And then again I can copy and paste it, or I can just go and change the color of it or the darkness of it. So I could go to image adjustment, brightness, contrast, and I can play around with the selection that I have made. Next, we're going to check out the polygonal lasso tool. So to deselect, you just have to go to Command D, or you can go to select, deselect, and then that'll get rid of the marching ants, and it'll deselect the portion of the image. So I'm going to go Command D to deselect. Next, we're going to look at the polygonal lasso tool. So this one again, you can see can be used in different modes, and in this case you basically click and drag and it'll make the selection for you. You have to click to close the selection. You see a little circle appears, which allows me to close the selection. And then again, I can change the color, paint inside if I want. Let's say I want to paint inside, I can do that. Or I can copy and paste it as well if I want. Next, we're going to have a look at the magnetic lasso tool. So if I select it, I can then first select 0 for the feather effect, so that way, yeah, I'll have a sharp selection rather than a fuzzy one. And then using the magnetic lasso tool, I just have to click and then keep clicking around her lips. So the way the computer is making the selection is based on the high contrast between the pixel colors of her lips and her skin. So anything that has a high contrast um, can be selected using the magnetic lasso tool. To finish the selection, I will click and then I will see the marching ants. Then I can go to edit copy, edit paste, and then I can see that the selection was made and it was sharp. So here's the extra lips. So if I go back to the background layer, I can just show you quickly how to make a feathered selection. So if I want a feathered selection, I can go here and enter 20 pixels. And then when I go make a selection with the ellipse tool, I can go to edit copy and edit paste. And then this time around, I'm getting a feathered selection. So you can make the selections sharp or feathered depending on what you're trying to achieve. Next, we're going to have a quick look at two more tools for selection. So first, we're going to go to Quick Selection tool. So the Quick Selection tool works also based on the pixel contrast color, and this tool is adjustable in terms of the size of the brush. So I can select it and then I can make the brush smaller or bigger. I want it smaller in this case. And then I can also put it in subtract or addition mode. So I'm going to click on the addition mode. And then the way this works is just selects pixels in a similar color range. So now I have just selected the entire lip area. And then I can again go copy and paste it, or I can paint inside of the selection, or I can do image adjustment in terms of color and saturation inside of the selected area, whatever else I wanted to do. So that's just another tool you can do. Again, Command D is to deselect. And next we're going to look at the last one for now, and that would be the Magic Wand tool. So the Magic Wand tool will select pixels of similar color. So if you are using it, you would have to press Shift to add to your selection, keep adding. And then if you click on addition mode, then you can let go of the Shift and it'll keep adding. So you see now it's adding just a few pixels at a time, and that's because my tolerance is low. If I increase my tolerance to 20, then it's going to select a higher number of pixels and it'll go a little bit faster. So if I go to 30, then it's going to select even more of the pixels within the similar color range. So that becomes a little bit faster. And again, depending on the image, you would have to play around with your tolerance. Again, lower if you want to select fewer pixels and higher if you want to select more pixels. I can actually use different tools in combination with any one of the tools. So I could go back to the lasso tool, and in the addition mode, I could add this little bit to my selection and this little bit to my selection, as well as I can click and drag to add these parts. So you can always switch between different tools. And if I want to take this off here because it's too much, I'm going to go to subtract mode, and then I will take that out of my selection in order to fix it, and I can then add to my selection in the addition mode, and then it'll be added. So here I have selected the lips, and I can go to edit copy, edit paste, and it will not be feathered because I have not used the feather when I did this. So I'm going to keep this here so that next we can have a look at the eraser tool. So now that I have so many layers, I can then turn the visibility on and off as usual. And what you're noticing that some layers have nothing in them and there's no pixels. So the checkerboard indicates no pixels. So if I zoom in here, you can see that I have some pixels and then the rest of it is blank. So this lack of pixels or no pixels is indicated by checkerboard in Photoshop. So most of these layers have almost nothing in them, except for my background has the entire image and the white pixels in the background. So bear in mind that if you want to work in a particular layer, you have to select it first. And that's why renaming them helps. So you can go back to whatever you need. So here is the lips layer. I can go back to it that way. The other thing that you can do is if you go to the Move tool, you can then see there's a box on top that says Auto Select. So if you turn that on, then you can just click on the pixels and then the layer will automatically get selected on its own. So I recommend having the auto select turned on, because if you don't have it turned on, then you have to find out what layer your pixels are in and then select that layer and then work in it. So computer's not going to automatically recognize the layer that you're clicking on. So again, what you can do is turn on the auto select, and then if I click on the nose, it'll automatically jump to the nose layer because I have my auto select turned on. So basically I would just keep that checked, so that way you can quickly jump between different layers even without having to select them physically, because they will automatically select it if your auto select is turned on. Next, we're going to look at the eraser tool. So now I'm going to click on the eraser tool and I'm going to go to the nose layer. So here we'll just click and drag. So using the regular eraser tool, the one that's on top, I can erase the pixels to transparency. So I will reduce the size a little bit to make it smaller, and I will keep the hardness at 100% and opacity at 100%. So if I click and drag, it'll erase the pixels. But notice the edge is very sharp. If I want the edge to be more blurred, then I can say hardness 0, and then now I have a much softer edge. I could increase my brush size and then it'll erase it, but still with the fuzzy edge. Okay, next we will select the eraser tool, and then if it's too big, you can use the square bracket to the left to make it smaller, and if it's too small and you want to make it bigger, you can use the right side square bucket to make it bigger. So make it smaller with the square bracket and then make it bigger with the right side square bucket. So that's pretty handy to quickly change the size of your brush. So next I'm going to select the nose layer, and I just want to show you that when you erase with 100% transparency, you're erasing all of the pixels. But if you lower the opacity to, let's say, 10 or 14, then you're erasing in a more transparent manner, which you may want to do sometimes. So you can try different transparent opacities when you're using the eraser tool as well. Next, we're going to look at the background eraser tool. So for this, I'm going to turn the visibility off for all of my layers, but I'll turn the layer 0, or the bottom background layer, as my selected layer. Then I'm going to select the background eraser tool. And then what that does, it erases the background color. So I can quickly erase the black color behind her. So first you have to sample the background color you wish to erase. So you're going to click once on the sampling once tool, the one in the middle, the eyedropper tool in the middle. So click on that once. Then once you click on the black pixel area, it's going to sample that color. And then as you continue using the background eraser tool, it's going to erase those pixels. And then you can just keep going that way. The other thing that you can do, which is even faster, is use the magic eraser tool. So if you click on the magic eraser tool, it'll erase all of the pixels in that color scheme. And again, you can make the tolerance lower if you want to select fewer of the color range pixels, or higher if you want to erase more of the pixels in that color range. If I want to delete all of the white pixels, I could then select tolerance to 5, let's say, and then erase all of the white pixels that way. So you can play around with the magic eraser and the background eraser, and notice that for both of them you can change the tolerance. So the lower tolerance will select fewer pixels of that color range, and the higher tolerance will erase more and more pixels that are in a similar color range. So you can experiment with these tools, so eraser, background eraser, and then magic eraser tool. And again, once you see the transparency, that means that you have erased all of the pixels because you are able to see the checkerboard. To see how to resize a particular object, so in this case I'm going to select the nose layer, so the computer knows which layer I'm going to be working in. Then I'm going to hit Control or Command T, and then I can click and drag to resize the pixels, or the nose in this case. If I press Shift, it's going to distort it, which may be what you want. But if you want to do it proportionally, then you do not press Shift, and then it's going to scale it proportionally. So because this is the only thing that I have in this layer, I didn't even have to make a selection in order to resize it. I just went to Command T, and then I went to drag the bounding box in the corner to resize it. If you have a particular range of pixels that you want to resize, you could make the selection first with your rectangular marquee tool, and then you can hit Command T, and then you can resize it. However, I have nothing in this layer other than the nose, so it doesn't really make a big difference there. But if you were to go to the main layer, and if you selected, let's say, the lips, you could then go to Command T. However, here it'll resize it, but it also kind of cuts it apart, which may not be what you want. But I just wanted you to see that if you make a particular selection, you can resize that with any of the selection tools. You can select it first, or if that's the only thing that you have in the layer, such as the nose, then you don't have to make a selection. You can just go directly to Command T, and then you can resize it right away, because that's the only thing that I have in this particular layer. Next, we're going to have a look at the paintbrush. So this is the paintbrush tool, the one on top we're going to use first. You can use the square brackets to make the brush smaller or bigger. You can also go to the menu, reduce the size of the brush. If you have the hardness at 0, then the brush will be very soft. If you have hardness at 100, then the brush will be completely sharp. And then of course you can slide it in between as well. You can also change the opacity. So if you put it at 100, then it's going to give you the color with 100% opacity. Before you start working with the brush, you should choose the layer first. So let's say I'm going to choose the layer lips, and then I'll double click here to choose green. I'm going to use 100% opacity, so as I go down, it's giving me 100% opacity of my green. If I want the brush to be completely completely sharp and hard, then I'll put hardness 100%. So then I have no fuzzy effect. If I want a fuzzy effect, then I'm going to put the hardness at 0, and then I will have a very soft brush edge. So you can play with the hardness and see now my hardness is set to 0, and therefore my brush is very, very soft. The other thing I can do is I can lower the opacity, let's say halfway down, and now my brush is semi-transparent. The other thing that you can do is change the mode of the brush. It can be multiply, normal, dissolve. You can go through, but just to show you, for example, multiply, it'll keep adding pixels on top, on and on as you go over and over. So for example, if I went over this, I can keep going on top and it'll become darker and it'll mix it with the pixels underneath. Whereas if I just went to normal mode of my brush, then it'll be transparent at first, but then it's gonna add pixels on top more and more to add pixels. So that is the difference between the normal and multiply mode. There's many other modes that you can try out as well, and so just practice that and see the different effects that you are able to achieve. In terms of the brushes, you can also click here and select any kind of different brush as well. There's many different ones that you can use, and later on we're going to learn how to create your own brush as well. But for right now, I'm just using the plain circle mode brush. Here you can also see some presets that you can select from, but again, you can just make your own size, hardness, and transparency, and then easily just change the color by double clicking and then selecting a different color, and then you can paint with the different color. Again, be mindful of what your active layer is, because whatever your active layer is, that's where the paint is going to be applied with your brush. Next, we're going to look at some of the adjustments that you are able to make. So I'm going to select my background and I will go to image adjustments. So there's many different ones that you can select from. For example, hue saturation is really good because you can make the image darker. You can make the image lighter, so you can play around with that. You can decrease saturation and therefore make it more gray, or you can increase saturation and make it more saturated. But notice as I do that, it's only doing it to my currently selected layer, which in my case is the layer with her face. If you change the hue, it'll change basically the hue or the color balance of the image. So you can play around with that. The other thing that I use very often here is brightness contrast. So you can increase the brightness up and down. Contrast can be lower or higher if you want to have a higher contrast. So those two are very useful. The other thing is vibrance. Vibrance is very similar to saturation. So if you increase the vibrance, the color will become more vibrant. There's also color balance. So if you want your picture to be, let's say, more greenish, then you can increase the greenish tint in the color balance box. But to review, most often you're going to use the brightness contrast, exposure, vibrance, hue saturation, and color balance. Exposure is also really good. It's kind of similar to brightness. It's basically allowing you to increase and decrease the exposure, but it's giving you additional options here to play with, which is the offset and the gamma correction. So that has a few more steps or a few more options, whereas image adjustment, brightness contrast is more straightforward and it doesn't have these extra options, but you can certainly play around with all of these and see what they do. Next, I'm going to select rectangle tool and ellipse tool and triangle tool. You can use any of them and then try practicing drawing different shapes. So I'll select the rectangle tool in a shape mode. The fill is fuchsia and I can change the stroke to be a different color, let's say orange. I can also increase the border and I can also make the border dashed or a solid line. And then I am now using the rectangle tool in a shape mode. I can change the fill to whatever I want, and I can change the stroke and the stroke thickness and the stroke type. Then when you click and drag, it's going to give you that shape. If you want to change it later on, you can still change it. So I can go here and change it to solid line, and it'll change. I can actually even change the stroke and the fill in case if I change my mind, so that's really great. And then I can move it with the move tool. So every time you use this tool, it's going to create a new layer for you automatically. So let's say I want to create a rectangle, so I'm going to choose green fill, and I will choose a thicker outline, let's say with yellow stroke. And then when I draw it, it's going to give me that effect. Make sure that you deselect the previous tool, because if you didn't, then it's going to change it. So I forgot to deselect my rectangle, so that's why the color and the fill changed. But that's not a problem, because I can go back and reset it to whatever I want. So if I go back to rectangle, it'll select this rectangle, then I can still change my mind and change the stroke and the fill to a different color, and also the thickness of the line to different colors. So if you make a mistake, you can just go back and fix it. So now I deselected everything. So then if I go to select the polygon tool, I can pre-select the color I want now, or I can change it later on. It's totally fine. And then I can click and drag, and I'm going to get gray with the pink outline, and then I can change it to be dotted, and I can change the thickness of the line as well. And what you're noticing, that it's creating a new layer for each one of these objects. But if you have, let's say, layer 0 selected, then when you create a new shape, it'll be created automatically above the currently selected layer. So when I have my lips selected as my currently selected layer, then the new shapes I drew got created above the lips layer. So just be mindful that whatever layer is currently selected, that's where the new shapes will be drawn above the currently selected layer. The same thing as in Illustrator, you can move the layers up and down. So I can move the nose up and down just by clicking and dragging it. I can move the rectangle up and down, or any of these tools as well, to restack them. So that's completely the same as in Illustrator. You can also use garbage to delete some of them. And you can use create new layer plus button to create a new blank layer in case if you want to paint something in it or work in it. So that's great, very similar to Illustrator. The other thing that you can do is you can select, let's say, rectangle, and then go to right click and then go to rasterize layer. So if I rasterize this particular layer, it's no longer an object, so it just becomes pixels. So then I can use my eraser tool and I can erase it. Whereas previously I would not have been able to do that. So if I say hardness 0, it's going to give me a fuzzy brush, and then I can just erase portions with the eraser tool. So you wouldn't be able to do that to your triangle because it's not pixels. So you would have to rasterize it first. So again, you go to rasterize, and then you will be able to work on it because it'll become made up of pixels instead of it being a shape tool object. Okay, next we're going to have a look at some of the other tools, such as healing brush, spot healing brush, and dodge, burn, sponge, and sharpen. So that's step 19 on your handout. So to do that, I'm going to turn off the visibility of all of these other layers that I have. And then I will select layer 0. So now I'm going to get rid of the pimples on Lady Gaga's face. So to do that, I'm going to use some of the new tools here. So let me just zoom in here. So you're going to use the spot healing brush, which is this one here, spot healing brush. So the size should be a little bit bigger than the pimples, so the computer will automatically calculate the area around the brush and then sample that color and then automatically clear the pimples. If I click on it, it'll go away. So the same here, click and it'll go away. So that is your spot healing brush, so that works automatically. I'm going to just undo this so I can get these pimples back. Then we're going to look at the second one there, so that's the healing brush. So for the healing brush, you actually first have to set the target of the skin that you want to use as a replacement. So I'm going to click on this good part of the skin, so I'll press Alt Option, it'll turn into a target, and then I click. So the target is set. So now, using that healing brush tool, I will just click on the pimple, and the computer has used the target area to fix my pimple. So that's kind of a little bit similar to the clone stamp tool that we're going to use next. So the first one, the spot healing brush will automatically calculate and erase the pimple, whereas the second one you have to actually set the target first with the Alt Option key, and then the computer will use the target section as your pixels to be used for the healing brush tool. Next, we're going to look at the patch tool. So next we're going to use the patch tool. So first you're going to click and drag to select the area you wish to fix or replace. And then you basically click and drag over the good part of the skin. You see it's targeting whatever I'm hovering over. So this is the good part of the skin, so I'm going to drop it off here. And then my first pimple section will be replaced with this new area that I have just selected. And then you go to Command D to deselect. So you can do that again. Let's do this one more time. So I'm going to click and drag to select the problem area. Then I click and drag and target whatever good part of the skin I want. So let's say this. And then I let go and it'll replace the pimple with a good part of the skin that I have selected. And then I go to Command D to deselect it. Next, we're going to have a look at dodge, burn, sponge, and blur and sharpen. So they're fairly easy to use. So first, I'm going to go to the dodge tool. So the dodge tool is used to make a particular part of the image lighter. So if I keep clicking here, it'll make that a little bit lighter. And then again, you can select exposure to be lower, which will be more subtle changes, or higher, which will be stronger changes. You can also select shadows, midtones, or highlights and play around with that. Again, the brush can be soft or hard, and you can also change the size as well. Opposite from that would be the burn tool. So the burn tool makes a particular area darker. So I'm just going to use the brackets. So here is the dodge tool, and I can't see it. So why can't I see it? Oh, because the brush is too big. So I'm going to reduce the brush to be smaller, and now I can see it. So again, sorry, you go to the burn tool, and that's going to make the image section that you're clicking on darker. I'm going to increase the exposure so you can see it better, and then I click and drag and it's going to go darker. So I can do that selectively for whichever area of the picture I want. And again, I can do that to shadow, midtones, or highlights, and I can increase exposure to be higher or lower as well. So that's dodge and burn. And then next we're going to look at the sponge tool. So sponge tool can be used to saturate or desaturate a particular section of your artwork. So if I want to click on desaturate, I can then click and drag, and the computer will desaturate that part of the artwork, and it'll make it more gray. So if I keep clicking, it'll become more and more gray because I'm desaturating my colors. So now it's completely grayscale. So you can selectively desaturate parts of your artwork. And then all opposite from that would be to saturate. So if you want to increase the color in a particular area, then you're going to use saturate tool. So if I go here, click over and over again, it's going to become more and more saturated, and then you can keep clicking. So that is the sponge tool. And the sponge tool as well, again, you can change the mode to saturate and desaturate, and you can also change the brush size and hardness the same as before. Next, we are going to look at the clone stamp tool, and then that'll be the last tool that we're going to be looking at today in this video. So the clone stamp tool is the one that looks like a stamp. So if I go here, I can use the clone stamp tool, click on that, and there's two different modes that you can work with. One is aligned and one is non-aligned. So first I'm going to select aligned. So if I click on aligned, then the aligned option is turned on for my stamp, for my clone stamp. So to begin, you have to first press Option key and click once to set the target, and you can actually see the target sign. So Option Alt press down and click once to select the target. Then I'm going to make a new layer because I don't want to screw this one up. So in the new layer, I will simply click and drag, but I have to increase the flow to be 100, and I want to increase the opacity. So then I click and drag, and I'm cloning, and it's just cloning her entire face, but every time I start again and again, it's aligned with her face. Okay, so that's the first way to use the clone tool. I'm going to delete that layer. The second way to use the clone tool would be to make it non-aligned. So I'm deleting this layer. So to make it non-aligned, you're going to turn off the aligned button, and then in this case you still have to set the target. So I'm going to press the Alt Option key, set her eye as the target, click, and now the target is set. I'll make a new layer again because I don't want to screw up the background layer. So the non-aligned option will give you her eye every time you start over again. So if you just want to clone her eye and repeat it over and over, then you're going to turn off the aligned mode. Don't forget to save your file as you work. So File, Save, and first you have to do Save As the first time you're saving it so that you can give it a name. So File, Save As, save to my computer. I'm going to call this Gaga Family Name, and then I can save it on the desktop as a Photoshop file, so that comes up as a default. So you just have to click on Save, and that's it. So next time if you make any changes, you can just go to File, Save, and then it'll save that. So next we're going to set up the file for the zombie punk exercise. For this you can use your own face, or you can use your friend's photo or somebody from your family. You can also use a celebrity photo if you want, but make sure it's a high resolution. So first you're going to go to File, New, and as you can see in the handout, you have to set it up so that it's letter size. So I'm going to click on Print. I'm going to click on letter size. The resolution will come up at 300, but I'm going to change it to 200 just because it'll make my computer work faster. And I'm not really going to put this in my portfolio, so I'm just practicing. But remember, if this was for real for your portfolio, then you would do at least 300 pixels per inch. But just for practice, I'm going to put 200 pixels per inch, 8.5 by 11, and then I'll click on Create. Here I can change the color to whatever I want, and I can then use the bucket to do the background color. So the fill bucket, you click, and then it'll fill it with color. I can change the color by double clicking and selecting a different color. Then you can go and check out the files I gave you. So in the week 8 demo files, I gave you sunglasses, bad skin, different kinds of bad skin, tattoos, piercing, veins. So you can use those, or you can find your own pictures as you work on creating a punk and a zombie, or a zombie. So if you were to look at your own images, you would just go to check out piercings, rings, let's say, and then Google that, go to images. Then you would click on tools, and then you're going to click on size, large size. So then computer's only going to display large size images. So here's a really good one. So I can click on that. It's large size, so that's what I want. And then I can go to Save Image As. And I'll click on Save. And it's a JPEG. So I could open that in Photoshop and I could use it. So if you want more pictures, then you can search for your own. So in this case, I have a picture here of Timothy. So I'm going to go to Open with Photoshop. And he is a fairly large image. So if you go to image size, it says here 2000 pixels. So around 2000 or 3000 pixels will be good enough. And probably your phone is going to give you around 2,000 or 3,000 pixels. So this is pretty good. I'm going to go to Command A to select all. And then I will go to Edit Copy. And then I'm going to bring him down here with Edit Paste. So now I can work on him. I can open, let's say, one of the piercings or the tattoos. So I can go here and open with Adobe Photoshop. In this case, probably the fastest thing to do would be just to use the magic eraser. So I'm going to click on the magic eraser, erase the background, Command A to select all, Command C to copy. So after I copied it, I can go back here and then paste it. And remember, you can do Command T to reduce the size. I'm going to rotate it so that it'll fit his nose. And then I can move this up. In a similar way, I'm going to bring in my tattoos as well and erase the background there. Here again, you could probably use the magic eraser, or you could use the background eraser, whichever you want. You can even crop the section you want and then erase the background if that's easier for you. You can also do similar thing with the sunglasses. In terms of the veins that I have here and the bad skin for a zombie, you can open that in Photoshop and you could use the clone tool. So if I use the clone stamp tool, I can hit Alt Option key, set my target, and I'm going to go back to my artboard, and then I can reduce the brush size or the opacity, and then I can start cloning some of this bad skin on his face to create the zombie look, like so. And again, you can like play around with the opacity and with the size of the brush. I would recommend that you use the brush that has 0 hardness so that the brush is really soft. I could also clone his eye if I wanted to. So if I use the clone tool, I would click on it and I would make sure that the aligned is turned off, so aligned is turned off. So then I can just clone his eye over and over if I wanted to for practice. So I will click here and to set the target, but make sure that you're in the proper layer. So this is the proper layer, target. And then I can start a new layer and then clone his eye in the new layer. And if it doesn't turn out, I can then just garbage this layer altogether. So let me do that again. I'm going to click on the clone tool, set the target in the layer where his face is. So here is my target, and then create a new layer, and then set the opacity to 100 because I want to be able to see his eye, and then I will just clone his eye like that. You can also play around with the other tools you have learned. So for example, dodge and burn are here. So burn tool will make a certain area darker, but again, remember to make sure that you are in the correct layer. So the layer where his face is what you need. I can also play with desaturate and saturate. So the sponge tool, desaturate, can allow me to make his lips look really grayish, so it looks like a zombie, like that. So play around with the dodge, burn, sponge. Play around with the brush. I can, for example, use the brush tool, select red, and then go to multiply, and then I can add some redness to his eye. But I'm going to go and do that in this layer because I want it to be on top of this eye. So here we are. Here I can put a little bit of redness. So always be mindful of what layer you're working in, because right now I want it to be in this layer. What might help you too is you can rename your layers. So I can double click here and call this the extra eye. This one is my veins, so I can call it veins. So you can start the new layer for whatever you're adding so that if it doesn't turn out, you can easily delete it. But remember, if you're cloning something, you have to definitely be in the main layer, and you can even just call this main, so that way you can remember where you're supposed to go. So I would just want you to practice using different tools, making selections, and try to use as many tools as you can, all of the tools that we have learned today, including the rectangle, ellipse, triangle. You can play around with those as well. And also image adjustment, hue, saturation, exposure. You can move the areas that you have pasted, make different selections, use the paintbrush, use the clone stamp, dodge and burn. So just practice those, and then you will have to go to File, Save As, save on my computer, and then I'm going to call this one Zombie, and then my family name, and then I can just save that on my desktop. And you can also just revisit your layers, make sure you rename them properly, and that will be all for this video. Have fun!